A couple weeks, well, I think it was when Dustin was here, and Jill had a class for the young people in the back, and that class was about Jeroboam, and when he had basically set up a different altar in a different place at a different time, and this prophet came to him and said, this ain't working here. And Jeroboam said, "Seize him." And his hand withered, and he couldn't even draw it back. And it talked about the prophet, having to leave, not stay anywhere, and that. And that was really good, but I thought, I wonder what's before that. So I read a little before that of how that all came about, how that transpired. And it was Jeroboam that basically decided what he wanted with the worship. In 1 Kings chapter 12, in verse 33, a little prelude to that. He had two golden calves built to set up as gods for Israel. One he set up in Bethel and the other one in Dan. He built shrines on the high places, appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they weren't the Levites that they should have been. He instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made. And at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he had made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he had built at Bethel. So he instituted the festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. All of this was his own choosing. So what difference did it make? What difference does it make? I mean, in all honesty, it was his own choosing. I mean, don't people do that today? I mean, it's what I choose to do. I have my own free will. It's what a multitude of people that claim to be Christians, believers, in different denominations, it's what they choose to do. And what difference does it make? It makes a huge difference. But see, if you look at this, it's not too far off from what really God had planned, is it? I mean, he set it up on the 15th day of the 8th month. What was God's plan? 15th day of the 7th month. What's 1 month? It's no big deal. We can have communion once a month, right? Once a quarter. It's no big deal. I mean, we're still observing, correct? I mean, that's what he was saying here. We're still observing. We're still doing sacrifices. So what difference does it make? How important is it that we adhere strictly to this word in how we worship? I mean, if that be the case, that's the reason that we partake of the Lord's Supper the first day of every week, isn't it? Because it tells us to. It's why we give of our means on the first day of the week, because it tells us to. It's why we sing songs and hymns without instrumental music, because it's what he tells us to. It's why we have the plan of salvation to include baptism. It's because he tells us. But yet, so many people out there say, what difference does it make? I'm a believer. And that's the common phrase today. Is it, are you a believer? Yes, I'm a believer. Of course I am. But what are you classifying as a believer? They're thinking that all you have to do is believe. And that's it. I asked him into my heart. I believed, and I'm good. My ticket's punched. I can do whatever I want because, grace covers me. And yet, that's not what it says here. But their attitude really, in all reality, is, what difference does it make? You're a Christian, I'm a Christian, we're all going to heaven, aren't we? Except those that say, I'm going to be going to hell because that's where all my friends are going to be, and I want to be with my friends. That's a really twisted look at eternity, isn't it? I mean, very twisted. But yet, sometimes, if we look at it, as we've talked about, Christ and the church, the relationship. If we can't have a good relationship within the church here, how do we expect to get along in heaven? If we can't get along here, we're going to be up there forever. Here, we're together, a couple, 3 times a week. And if we can't get along here, how do we expect to get along up there? Where it's going to be, we're going to be in the presence of every Christian, every one of God's children, all of our brothers and sisters, all the time. We're going to be singing praises to God. But sometimes we say, well, what difference does it make? It makes a huge difference. If we are not one, how can we be one up there? If we can't be one here. Jeroboam thought he had the answers. He thought, I'm going to rekindle this. I'm going to do this my way. And it's unfortunate there's a lot of people out there now, today in this world, that says, I'm going to do it my way. I mean, they may have a little bit of biblical information, they're spiritual. They consider themselves righteous. But are they following what he says? Because there is so much here, and it's like what we mentioned tonight. We can do all the things to try to know what God's will is for us. As we said before, we can fast, we can read His Word, we can do all these things, we can pray in that. But if we're really not willing to submit to His will, why are we even bothering? Because that's what He wants us to do. Submit to His will. What He has planned for us. And I will guarantee you, what He has planned for us is way better than anything that we could ever think of. Because we can plan this out, and we can make plans for a week or a month or a year or our retirement. Or we can make plans out for however long we want. And we figure, hey, we got it all down. We got all of our ducks in a row. This is how it's going to work. It was comical. June was talking about Roger and Frank and what they had planned and what they want to do. And I'm thinking, you know what? Sometimes it just never works out. The best laid plans go awry. And I'm thinking, even now, at 60-some years, I still don't have it figured out that, God's plan is always the best. That no matter what I do, no matter what I plan for tomorrow, if I am not going to submit to His will, my plans are probably going to fail. More than likely they will. Something to think about. Do we have an attitude sometimes of what difference does it make? Because if we do, we need to change that attitude. Because it does make a difference. How we do things. How we treat each other. How we present ourselves to the world. We talked all over this tonight with Cole's lesson. How are we before the people outside? How seasoned is our speech? What kind of an example do we set before them? It's easy to set a good example amongst us, isn't it? Because we're here. And we're amongst people that we know we shouldn't have to be on guard. But when we get out into the world, we do have to be kind of on guard, don't we? And do we sometimes take that to the extent that we don't season our words with salt? That we brush that opportunity aside that we have to present the gospel? Or to give an encouraging word? To invite someone to a Bible study? Do we brush that aside because, I don't want to be made a fool in this crowd? How often was Paul made a fool? He wasn't a fool, but everybody thought he was. And they put him in prison for it. Everybody thought Christ was a fool. He was a blasphemer. They hung him on the cross. How far do we want to take our salvation, our Christianity, out into the world? How far do we want to take it? Do we want to take it all the way, as it says here, that we should? Go into all the world, teaching them, preaching to them, baptizing them? Do we want to do that? Or do we say, what difference would it make? If I don't do it, somebody else will. You may be the only one that reaches that one person. And if you bypass that opportunity, that person may never make it. If there's anyone here tonight that needs to make a decision to follow Christ, or if you have any other need, let that be known as we stand and sing our closing song, which we have not